This is just a question of time when the current regime will be forced to sit to the table or will be forced to leave the country.
Welcome everyone to another edition of the Forum 2000 online chat. And I'm very honored today to be talking to Aleś Alachnovič. Is that how I pronounce it? Alachnovič?
Exactly.
Okay, Aleś Alachnovič, who is Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya's economic advisor, as well as holding various other positions and being a PhD candidate at Warsaw University. Is that right?
Warsaw School of Economics.
Warsaw School of Economics. Very good. So Aleś, great to be here. Firstly, the first question, obviously, is, with everything happening, and we've all seen the pictures weekend after weekend, are you okay? Are your family okay? Are your loved ones okay?
Yes, in my case, everything is fine. But obviously, in Belarus, there are much more people. Already almost 20,000 people have been detained or went through the jails. So the situation had not stabilized yet.
Yeah, well, let's send out all our wishes and hopes for those people in particular. So now let me launch into some questions that are about the situation and to some extent, given your position about the Belarusian economy and the vision for the future. So the first question is, as I understand it, the call for a general strike on October the 26th was not followed, or not massively followed, and not followed enough. Why was that?
Let me start from saying that the last day before this call, on Sunday, it was a huge protest. Over 200,000 people went to the streets in Minsk, and it was one of the largest gathering since August. So it has an impact. On Monday, there were some of the state-owned enterprises. Part of the personnel, part of the staff went on strike. Not the whole enterprises, but some of them. And much more private companies were closed.
But still, compared to August 13th was a real victory, right? And it turned the situation in that there was clearly a temptation on Lukashenko's part to ignore the result. August the 13th was an extraordinary success.
Yes.
This was not at that scale.
Yes. So maybe that is also the reason why in the end of September it was more difficult, because many people who started some kind of strikes in August have been already fired, and many more have been persecuted or pressed politically. And this is why maybe less people were ready to went on strike.
So would it be fair to say that, as you said, you have the weekend demonstrations in the major cities that are still gathering enormous support, people showing great levels of bravery, and yet pushing it beyond that is currently proving to be hard?
Yes. However, we need to understand, and people from abroad need to understand, that the regime of Lukashenko is one of the most centralized, one of the most harsh dictatorship among all former Soviet countries, or among all socialist countries. The regime is much stronger than the rule of Yanukovych in Ukraine, than rulers in other countries like Moldova, Armenia, Kyrgyzstan, and many others. So in our case, it is much more difficult to fight with such the regime.
Okay.
And on the other hand, the Belarusian society until recently was atomized, was really atomized, and we didn't have that massive protests ever.
Yeah. No, totally, and maybe we'll come back to this question of the politics. But let me take a digression now into economics, and I think the transition is a good point. So, as you say, Lukashenko's regime is extremely centralized. Has got a lot of state force and state thuggery. But on the other hand, the economy, one might say, has been a success story. And can I just quote you? So I'm in no way a Belarus expert, but I was very struck by an article written by Sławomir Sierakowski, and maybe you know the article. Let me just quote very briefly from that article. So Sławomir has been in Belarus over the summer, has watched this, is extremely sympathetic to your protests and your cause. In this very brilliant article, I think, The Making of a Revolution, he writes this. For almost everyone entering from somewhere other than Russia, arriving in Belarus can be a culture shock, or at least a huge surprise. The expectation is you will see a collapse of civilization, a prevalence of communist trash. But what you encounter is a modern, clean, and relatively affluent country that offers practically everything that any other EU country offers, apart from the principles of liberal democracy. Moreover, in certain areas, Belarus evokes respect. Indeed, this is true when it comes to matters that are especially valued in the West: social policy, technological advancements, well-organized public transport and motorways, and means of addressing the most pressing social concerns. Is that wrong as a characterization?
I wouldn't say that this is wrong, but I will also not say that this is true. This is a part of the story. Look, everything depends on the benchmark with which you will compare Belarus. Once you compare it with the Ukraine, with Russia or Moldova, perhaps it looks not that bad. But if you change the benchmark and compare Belarus to Poland, to Slovakia, to Estonia, Lithuania, and some other Eastern European countries, which started their path in economic transition 30 years ago from the very similar level of economic development. I'm not talking about institutional development. Belarus had worst case, which didn't have the central bank, the national money, the border with Russia, Ukraine, and Lithuania and Latvia. So it was another story. But Belarus and Poland, Belarus and Lithuania, Belarus and Slovakia has very similar the standard of living of people 30 years ago. After the 30 years, all right, Mr. Sierakowski is right that the streets are clean and the regime is centralized and many things are working. It's true. But nevertheless, the average salary in Belarus is 3 times lower than in Poland.
At purchasing power parity, since we're amongst economists here, Sierakowski says purchasing power parity numbers are, I think he quotes $22,000 at purchasing power parity for GDP per capita, something like that. I can't remember the number exactly, but I mean, 3 times lower sounds that I don't think Poland is at $66,000.
In terms of purchasing power parity, it depends on the currency rate. And
of course.
In terms of Belarus, during the last 12 years, we had 4 currency crises: in 2009, in 2011, in 2014, and currently. So it depends also on which year and on which currency you will compare. But if everything would be all right in Belarus, then you will not explain why so many people are emigrating to Poland to study there, to work there, and to realize their potential, including business potential. And
so can I? Yeah, okay. Sorry, keep going.
Almost no Poles, no Slovaks and Czechs moving to Belarus to realize their potential in Belarus.
So okay, let me again push back, and I have to say I'm I'm parroting this article, but I think it at least presents a challenging point. So a point that is made is that Belarus has followed a distinctive economic strategy under Lukashenko. That economic strategy has, for example, not led to the massive scale of brain drain and exporting of talent that, let's say, has had such political repercussions in Hungary. It has people, despite a sizable elite diaspora, it is not the low paid who have gone off to do low service sector jobs in further west. He has maintained a distinctive national economy in manufacturing, in branded products, etc. And what he offers, therefore, the argument presented by Vladimir is that, like it or not, this is a very different and distinctive starting point for an economy and for a country than Poland, Hungary, Czechia, Slovakia in the mid-1990s.
Yes. Again, I partially agree with this and with the article of Mr. Serakovsky. And I agree that there are positive sides or some advantages of the current regime. Yet, this story was more true during years 2000s, because then Belarus was called a Mir Economic Miracle, because without economic transition, without market reforms, Belarus was able to perform over 8% of annual economic growth from years 2000 to 2008, as high as China. But the only explanation of this was enormous energy subsidies from Russia, which counted to almost 15% of GDP of Belarus from the years 2000 to 2008. Since then, these energy subsidies, they went down, and currently they are not that high. They are around 2% of GDP this year. And in order for the Belarusian regime to change this engine of the economic growth, it started borrowing money from abroad. From 2008 to 2014, the public debt skyrocketed. So that was the second engine of the Belarusian growth. And since then, from 2014, the economic growth in Belarus is very low, almost 0% on average. And right now, the Belarusian economy does not have these advantages that you mentioned. Yes, before, when the energy subsidies were high, or when the public debt was low and it was possible to borrow money, it was easy to give people employment, to perform high growth in salaries and so on. But currently, during the last 12 years, we had 4 crises, and even before the COVID, the economic prospects of Belarus were very low because of, for example, tax maneuver in Russia, because of already high public and corporate debt, because of demographic challenges, and so on.
So let me continue with my devil's advocate questioning. So I take it, I'm certainly not trying to argue that that the economic position or the country's position can't be improved. But let me try these points. This economic, the starting point that Lukashenko has created is remarkable throughout Central Europe, maybe not compared to Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, but throughout Central Europe, in having been done essentially without an oligarchization of the economy. And one has to take it as an achievement, given the problem of oligarchization that we've seen in Central Europe. The second point is there's been an extraordinarily successful high-tech IT software sector, hasn't there? And indeed, I think it's been politically very active and as a sector. But that is also a creation of that economic model, isn't it?
Yes. So let me start from oligarchs and then IT sector. In terms of oligarchs, absolutely right. No oligarchs in Belarus. We have only one guy who is ruling, and he doesn't need any oligarchs or counterparts. So is it better? It depends. Obviously, Belarusians want to live in a democratic country, and these massive protests that are lasting for already over 3 months show that people are ready for this change, and the regime will not last much longer. In terms of IT sector, I agree that this is huge success. Incredible success. The Belarusian IT sector is booming every year by 30-40%, and this also shows one thing, that such huge success of Belarus is possible in case of no state intervention in the industry, because the IT sector is the ease of doing IT in Belarus is huge, and then tax preferences and some other preferences are enormous. And this shows that if you create favorable conditions in some other industries, it's also possible for Belarus to demonstrate other successes. To be comparative with, Poland, Germany, Russia, and so on.
Of course. No, I have no doubt about that. And obviously the extraordinary passion that's been shown on the streets also shows a nation that is ready to move forward. And I certainly don't want to suggest anything different. Look, I completely see that Belarus is ready to break free, to move forward economically, and have absolutely no doubt that, of course, it's a country that will do so with enormous success. But can I come back to try and bring this economic question back to the political? Because it seems to me that, because of what we've been talking about, because in a sense of in some senses, a relative success of the economic model until recently that Lukashenko developed. The question naturally comes, what kind of model of transformation, what's the model of opposition is there for Belarus? Let me just make a few suggestions and then you can comment on them. It seems to me that we're not like, Solidarity in Poland in 1979, because the state of Belarus society is in Belarus society is in a much healthier state than Poland was then. So nor is it Czechia in Church 77. Are we in the position? So one question mark, obviously, and a comparison point would be, and a horrible one, is this more like China in 1989 and Tiananmen? We have to hope that that's not where this goes. Is a model, as I was trying to think through these models, can we think of the role, the task, what the opposition has to do now, a little bit more like South Korea under Park in the 1970s and 80s? And that is, you have an authoritarian leader who has had some history of economic competence, who is incapable of delivering political and economic liberty, and therefore there's a relatively long process of opposition which eventually delivers a democratic constitution. Is South Korea the place we should be thinking about?
I hope it's not. I hope really that our model is very similar to the model of other European, Eastern European countries. That is the democracy with a market economy. And this is just a question of time when the current regime will be forced to sit to the table or will be forced to leave the country because the poor state of the economy and the will of the nation will force them to do it.
So, okay, what is it? If it's going to be the economy that breaks the regime, what are your tactics?
Maybe not my tactics, but rather my analysis. Let me call it this.
Okay, your analysis.
So far, the Belarus entered a recession already in the very beginning of the year, among others due to the quarrels over gas and oil from Russia. Later, it was hit by COVID-19. Belarus did not go into lockdown, but the demand on Belarusian exports went down. And another hit was in August, and since then, this protest, it also have an impact on the Belarusian economy. So the recession has been there, the protests only intensified these negative trends. And during the next several months, if there is no dialogue between the political elite and the society, the economic trends, negative trends, will not stop. And what do I mean? The Belarusian ruble will lose its value. The public debt of Belarus in 97% is denominated in hard currencies, in USD, Russian ruble, Chinese yuan, and so on. So the loss of value, depreciation of Belarusian ruble leads one-to-one to higher costs on serving the debt, public debt, and later corporate debt as well. People, households, but also businesses, they're changing bank deposits from Belarusian rubles to USD or other currencies. People in Belarus, the salaries and pensions, and they either stopped growing or even slightly decreased recently, not only in real terms, but even in nominal terms.
So given everything you're describing, if I were, I don't like to do this, but if I were in Lukashenko's shoes, I would impose exchange controls. I would go to my powerful and gas-rich neighbor and see what I could offer to get another sweet deal on gas and oil. And I would impose import controls. And I would tough it out that way. Is that what, do you think that's what's going to happen?
In general, this might happen, but this will only increase the problems in the Belarusian economy. And so far,
except for the cheap hydrocarbons, which will, in the short term at least, help.
The question is whether it will be possible for Lukashenko to get these cheap energy resources from Russia. Why so? So far, Belarus, let's consider three main geographical countries or regions who are in partnership with Belarus. The West, or the democratic world, it stopped, almost stopped any projects with new projects, not ongoing projects, but any new projects with the Belarusian state. I mean, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the European Investment Bank, Euro Commission, and so on. There is also China, and China supported Belarus politically and earlier also financially. But so far, China is nowhere near to support Belarus. Why? Because 90% of the cargo going by land from China to the European Union goes through Belarus. And for China, it's extremely important to have stable Belarus. Currently, Belarus is not stable, and the political and geopolitical quarrels between Lukashenko and Poland and Lithuania shows that for China, Lukashenko is no longer a geostrategical asset. So China is not supporting Lukashenko financially, so far at least. Now we are left with Russia, the main counterpart. And in the structure of public debt in Belarus, 60% of this debt is owned by Russia directly or indirectly. And Russia so far, Mr. Putin announced $1.5 billion for Lukashenko. It was 2 months ago. Russia, the Eurasian Fund for Reconstruction, for Stability and Development, lent to Belarus $500 million. It's not that much, and this money went for refinancing of Belarusian debt for Gazprom. Another $1 billion will be divided in and should be submitted to Belarus by the end of this year and already next year. So you see, this money, first of all, are not that big. Second of all, they are conditional. They are conditional on paying the previous debt. They are conditional on whether Lukashenko is ready to give to sign some agreements with Russia. So this money are no longer unconditional. This situation, very huge support, political, economical, energetical, military, information support in 15 and 20 years ago is no longer true for Belarus.
So we should wrap it up. But I think that what you're saying is that we have to hope that Putin understands that this is not a good long-term investment on his part. For sure. That he shouldn't be putting good money after bad.
For sure, this is true.
Aleś Alachnovič, thank you so much for this conversation. We could go on for a very long time. All the best. I wish you all the best wind in the world in your efforts, and hope to have another conversation in better circumstances soon.
Thank you also to you for this brilliant dialogue and being a good interviewer. And thank you also to the Foundation for this ability to present my views. Thank you.